Hi, my name's Phil Craig. I'm a writer, a TV producer, a lover of stories, and a connoisseur of scandal. And I'm on a mission to bring you the most scandalous tales ever told. So thanks for joining me here at the Scandal Mongers podcast. Hello and welcome once again to me, Phil Craig, Scandal Mongers podcast at my Australian bar. Now let's look at this comment. Oh, that's interesting. This channel has gone to SHIT since Andrew Lonia left. Oh, thanks, Alex John. That's a nice way to wake up. It's a nice thing to wake up to in the morning, isn't it? Well, actually, no, I didn't wake up to it because it's been on there for several days. Lots of comments on last week's show, and some of them were actually quite complimentary. But before I get into that, it may or may not have gone to you-know-what. That's not for me to say. But at some point this week, maybe it was when you were watching and making your comment, Alex. At some point this week, we passed 1 million downloads. Well, 1 million views plus listens, because you have to. It's a little bit of inexact science, but I get the data from Apple and other places. So we've gone through 1 million in 2.5 years. Which, given that we were told 100,000 a year when we started would be pretty good going, I think I can feel fairly pleased with myself and with Andrew, because of course most of that, well, not most, I think 2/3 was when we were a double act. And yes, I do miss him. And yes, I thought about giving up, to be honest, when he said he didn't want to do it anymore. But I enjoy it, as is probably obvious. It's very nice for me to get to meet all these interesting writers. I think it's probably helped my writing. It's certainly broadened my knowledge and my contacts. And as long as people tune in and keep enjoying it, I am going to keep on going. And I think it's also very helpful in the build-up to the book launch. I got to meet some people like Giles Milton, who agreed to look at the book and say nice things about it, which I don't think would have happened. So, as I've said before, I'm actually grateful to Andrew, because he has a much bigger literary reputation than I have. But he's helped me to build in that world by doing this podcast with me. And as I've said before, he's promised to come back, not for good, but to talk about his Andrew book, which I think is due in about 2 months. But I have to email him and check that out. What else this week? Oh, that very first comment, and probably our last comment, from the Italian Academy of Absinthe Studies, Accademia d'Absinthe, Azenzio Italia, thanking us for probably thanking the author, really, Nina Studer, a very, very good interview about absinthe last week, which I really enjoyed doing. And these Italian academics who study absinthe, maybe they just drink it, thanking us for nailing some of the lies and the exaggerations about the drink, which we did in that show, and it was really interesting. Rebecca Day, hello Rebecca, you've been on before. Rebecca Day 8612, what a fascinating episode. I remember my first time trying absinthe. Part of the fun was the sense that it was something forbidden, something dangerous. The mystique of it, the ritual, melting the sugar cube, the intense colour of the drink, how it actually burned going down your throat. I had no crazy stories, unfortunately, but it was just a lot of fun. And yes, your guess was right. It basically is just very strong alcohol. That was true. That's what it is. So if you haven't seen it, and it wasn't hugely popular compared to some we've had recently, I would recommend it to you. Brian Garrett is here to remind us that absinthe makes the heart grow fonder. Very funny. Jonathan Brewer, hello Jonathan, reminds us that Oscar Wilde said, who loved a glass of absinthe, loved lots of things, I can resist everything except temptation, says Oscar. Maybe that's you too, Jonathan. Although you say, I personally have never dipped into the green fairy, although occasionally I do walk on the wild side and enjoy a Budweiser Zero. That made me laugh. And then, all that fluff and stuff, one of the best names out there. You've been on here a few times before. And guess what? I'm going to give you comment of the month. In fact, now I think about it, I may have done that before. But I can't remember. If I have, you can have a second mug. Give it to a friend. This was from a couple of weeks ago. I just love the comment. Yes, I watched last week's episode, Phil, with Carolyn Harris, all about Catherine the Great. But I didn't leave a comment. I didn't want to look like a weirdo fangirl. But I decided to leave one this week. This is talking about my book. Oh, yes, my book. Did I mention I have a book? Which looks like you're going to buy. Thank you for that. Do we need to read the first couple of books in the trilogy for this one to make sense? Good day from the Whitsunday Islands, Queensland, Australia. Yeah, you don't have to read the first two. Obviously, I'd like it if you did. But the final one, 1945, The Reckoning, here we are. I can't help myself. There we are. Isn't it beautiful? It really is a very lovely cover, I think. Yeah, it's totally standalone. It covers different stories, has mostly different people to the first two books in the Finest Hour trilogy. But thank you for that lovely comment. There's nothing weird or fangirly or fanboy for commenting on this. We love the comments, and that's comment of the month. So I can't now remember if you've had that before. If you have a second mug. I'll check my emails, but if you haven't, you can contact me through the bio at the on the bottom of the video, or if you're listening, it'll be down below where you click on the link. You can email me and I will give me your address and I will send a mug all the way to Queensland, which I think might be, I know I sent one to Shauna Kay, who lives in Queensland. So it'll be in good company. Right, what else to say? Oh, I'm talking to Julie Bindle. Some of you may have heard of Julie. I'm talking to her for a program probably next week or the week after. There's been we talked the other day about the grooming gang scandal, the rape gang scandal here in Britain, how it rumbles on. And Channel 4, just 2 nights ago here, put out the most shocking and extraordinary documentary, and really one of the big ones. People will remember the post office scandal, how that was kind of really driven up public agenda, people's agenda and political agenda by a fantastic TV series. Well, this Channel 4 show, oh my God, I mean, we know some of it. We know about the girls, how they were preyed upon, how it took an age for the story to come out. But what this particular documentary really drilled into was the degree of, well, you can't even say complacency, complicity, is that a word? Of organizations that are meant to look after citizens, especially children, in councils, in the police. Just some absolutely shocking stories, and indeed stories where the abusers were given the benefit of the doubt over and over again, and even jobs, and kept in jobs, and people looking the other way, and people not wanting to make a fuss and stir up trouble, lots of that. So I want to talk a bit more about that with somebody who really does know, because Julie Bindle was one of the very first writers, journalist, pioneering feminist campaigner for lesbian rights, but also for women's rights, women and girls at risk of violence and refuges and rape crisis centres. She was part of that movement for a long time. So Julie's going to come and talk to me soon about all of that. It will not be a pleasant or a happy conversation, but I think it's a really important one. This is probably the biggest scandal really in post-war Britain, I think, social policy-wise. Not necessarily because of the scale, but really because of the fact that agencies that should have done their jobs didn't. Which explains why there is continual demand here for a big judge-led inquiry where people have to give evidence under oath to find out just why senior people didn't do their jobs. And as the documentary proves, that meant that some of these young women, they were just children, suffered unnecessarily for years in many cases, and are still suffering and still can't get justice. And there even is the suggestion that the gangs are still operating kind of below the radar. I mean, it's just an overwhelming scandal. And the current party, the one I voted for, the party I've been a member of, the Labour Party, just doesn't seem to want to engage with it. And we can speculate about that. And I know doubtless will with Julie. Anyway, moving on from that. We haven't done much on the royals recently on here. I'm sure a lot of those million views were programs about the royals. I mean, Andrew and I did a lot of them, including, I think, some quite significant ones when we had Valentine Lowe on at the beginning of the podcast. If you've ever want to go back and look at that, Valentine came on here and spoke about his work on his book Courtiers. He broke lots of stories about the behind-the-scenes rows that led up to Harry and Meghan flouncing or bravely escaping, whatever word you want to prefer, from the royal family. We've talked to people from all sides of it. I think it's fair to say Andrew and I took a slightly different position on this, or maybe a better way of saying it is I took a very different position from most of the viewers. I was always more sympathetic to Harry and Meghan. I think this is because, as I've said before, my work on Diana, which focused to a large degree on some of the behind the scenes spinning during her time, and indeed after her death, maneuvering to get Camilla into place, and some of the things that were said and done. Harry's mentioned a lot of this in his book. And of course, he had this big campaign against Murdoch, and I was very enthusiastic about that. Rather disappointed that in the end he sort of chickened out of taking it to the final stage. Talked to Clive Irvin many times about this, my mate Clive. So I've always been a little bit on their side. But this week, goodness me, did you see the interview? The Meghan interview? It has to be endured, not watched. It is painful. It is painful. Toes will curl if you watch it. And this podcast she went on, I mean, talk about the softest of soft ball questions. It was just, I don't know, was it Jamie Kern-Lima? I don't know much about it. She clearly has a reputation in America. Do you remember the Wicked press interview when the Wicked film was out? And they were all incredibly soppy and drippy and talked about holding space and how they felt for each other, and they were all holding hands, and everything was so kind of like cloying and sentimental. Well, this Meghan interview with this woman makes that one look like Frosty Nixon. I mean, really, it's swimming through treacle. It's emotional. It's kind of like unbelievably sort of soppy. And things she says, I know I'm a great friend. I know what a great human being I am. It's for other people to say normally, Meghan. And also, didn't you fall out with like everybody you've ever sort of worked with, or your family and your husband's family? I'm in love now more than ever. Oh, God. Oh, have you seen my husband? Isn't he a fox? And his heart is even more beautiful. I mean, nobody has ever tried harder to say that they don't want to try. And with every kind of sentence of kind of cloying sentimentality and niceness squared, niceness trebled. You can just imagine, if you're doing the comedy cut, there's an assistant cowering in terror in the corner because she's got the coffee order wrong, and Meghan's going to bawl her out because, that's what Valentine Lowe exposed, that she's not the easiest boss, apparently. But no, she's wonderful. She's a great human being. She said so herself. Oh, and the host, I'm getting full body chills, Meghan. I'm feeling so emotional. Oh, let's just share some more stories. I feel my soul filling with love and insight and inspiration. I've never cried so much. I could go on. It's an endurance test, actually, of your gag reflex. This thing. So yeah, a lot of it's the victim complex. But I guess the reason I wanted to talk about it was the line that a lot of people picked up on, which I think is actually the most important line in the whole interview, is when she started talking about, yes, my husband, he slayed the dragon and he saved the princess. Slayed the dragon, saved the princess. What does that mean? Nothing is said accidentally in these set piece interviews. Nothing at all by anybody involved in this. The Kremlinology here is a very exact science, a fine science, and there are a lot of people looking and thinking. I mentioned a few weeks ago that when Jason Knauf, that was the very well-connected still, it worked for Harry, worked for William, he's very close to William. He did a big interview for Channel 7 in Australia. And in that programme, other people also gave interviews. And nothing that was in that show happened without William's approval. I can absolutely promise that. And it was seen by many people, including me, seen by many people, including me, as a olive branch to Harry. Lots of talk about how he was so good in his old job, how they made a great team. The suggestion, not made by Jason, made by somebody else, that they should be seen together at big events in the near future. And I made a prediction, actually, at that time. You can hold me to it. I said it'll either be at whichever happens sooner, depending on Charles's health, of course, either at William's coronation or more likely at the Invictus Games, which I think is only about 18 months away now. I mean, is it a year and a half and 2 years? I'm not sure. In Birmingham, they will be seen together. There's a sense that conversations are being held. And I spoke to various friends, this week too, and made contact with, messaged. And I can't really say who these people are, but I had about down about work. I am quite close to people who were very senior in that world and are still either in it or know people who are, and they get the goss. So you'd have to just trust me on this, that yes, it's clear that there is an offer out there to let's de-escalate, let's start on a path towards bringing Harry somehow back into the fold, maybe even doing some semi-official duties. Because I think that family rows do heal, even the really nasty ones. I was all for that. I am all for that. I know a lot of you aren't, but I am. So why does Meghan choose to start talking about slaying dragons again? Well, my friends think it's because the blockage on this reconciliation is her now. I'm sure that wasn't always the case. I think Harry, in many senses, drove the initial row. They when they were in the royal family. And you can tell that from the interviews he's given in the book and things he said in the Netflix show. Finding these little grievances, nurturing them, building them up, amplifying them, building it into an enormous theory of they're all awful, they're all wrong, we are, put upon, we are persecuted, we need to escape. And then, of course, the final twist of the knife, the thing that it's going to take many years to get beyond, the accusation of racism aimed at his sister-in-law, future Queen, Catherine, which was the biggest escalation in this whole story. And we'll probably, at some point, they'll have to find a form of words to get around that. But such things can be done. But she's talking about slaying dragons again. Interesting. And certainly my friends who know what's going on think that was a hang on, guys, this war's still on, as far as I'm concerned, from her. So I thought that was really quite a significant moment in an otherwise hard to watch, emotional kind of love fest with this softball interrogator. Yeah, not really an interrogator. It was more like going to a massage parlor, I think. Just having your ego, your full body, full ego experience of, oily compliments. And goodness me, we weren't taught to do interviews like that at the BBC, I can tell you. But yeah, it's podcast land. You can say what you like. And we all do. But yeah, that was my thoughts about Meghan. Played a big part in this podcast's history as we pass our 1 million downloads, 1 million listens, 1 million views. I'm sure we'll go back to her again. I think that the game is on. The moves are being made, positions are being staked out. It's not quite like Trump and Zalinski, but these things progress in stages, don't they? There's progress, and then there's suddenly another fracturing and an argument, and then feelers and intermediaries. But something is happening in that world. Let me tell you. All right, that's probably enough about me going on about the royals. What else? My book launch is going well. I've been doing, like you can tell from my voice, I've been doing lots of talking, lots of throat clearing. And I've got some big ones coming up, actually. I'm really excited. On Monday, which is the VE Day, the day after this podcast goes up, I'm going to be speaking on HMS Belfast. I don't know if any of you know London, or those of you who do know it's a big tourist attraction, an old World War II cruiser right there near the Tower of London. And the Imperial War Museum here having an evening event with music, food, 1940s dancing, built TV crews there, quite a few celebs, and there'll be a speaker, and that speaker is me. Yep, I think I'm the only one. So that's going to be an absolute hoot. I might be playing some clips from some of my old World War II shows, talking about my books, and of course the most recent one, and trying to sum up what it all means to me, connecting the past and the present in the way that I like to try in my books. And that'll be an amazing opportunity to be in the middle of London on what will be a lovely, warm spring evening, 80 years after the end of the war in Europe. Wow, I get chills. Yes, I'm turning into one of those podcasters. I'm getting full body chills, Meghan. I'm getting full body chills. But I think actually, given that this is really rather more important, the end of the Second World War, than what Meghan is saying about slaying dragons and so on. Oh, I'm a really good person. I know I'm a good person. Crikey. Let it go, Phil. So that's going to be amazing for me. I'm looking forward to that. I don't know if any of you are planning to go. I think tickets are available. It's not cheap, but it'll be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to party on a World War II. I think there'll be fireworks too. I mean, this will be the last big anniversary of the Second World War, where there's still just about a few people around who fought in it. And it'll be, by the time we get to the 90th, there'll be none left at all. And I think this will be quite an event. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm also going to speak, I think, at the Battle of Britain War Room. It's called the Battle of Britain Bunker. which is, I think, in Buckinghamshire. Again, if anybody lives that way and wants to see me, that's also on VE around lunchtime. So, and I got my Australian tour. I'll tell you more about this nearer the time in October. That's looking really exciting. You know, I love Australia. Lived and worked there. Got loads of friends there. I'm going to be speaking at the State Library in Perth, the Australian War Memorial in Canberra, that's like the Glastonbury to me of military history. That's going to be fantastic. And I'm going to be speaking in Sydney at the Maritime Museum, and hopefully Melbourne too, although that's not confirmed yet. So I'll let you all know about that if any of you want to come into any of those places to hear me go on about my book and the war. And I'll usually have a guest with me. Chris Masters, Australians will know, he's a TV legend, writer, historian, reporter, investigative reporter. He's going to be on stage with me in Sydney, and there'll be people of similar stature with me as well, I hope, my Aussie mates. So I haven't even mentioned the subject of today's show. Isn't that silly of me? But it's also quite topical. Gerald, I always get this wrong. It's Gerald, Phil. Every time I do this, I say Gerard. Gerald Posner, great mate. He's been on this podcast several times. Knows a lot about a lot of things. He talks very well about the Kennedy assassination. He's a real world expert on that. But he also came on over a year ago to talk about the Vatican. And he is kind of obsessed, really, with the politics of the Vatican and the scandalous history of the Vatican, especially when it comes to money and the numerous scandals around money. Of course, there are numerous scandals at the Vatican about numerous things, and some of them are sexual as well, and that will no doubt come up in our conversation. But I wanted to talk to him when I heard that the conclave was on, because he calls the shots like a sports reporter. Who's up? Who's down? Where you should put your money, and what it all means for the church, the Catholic Church, a rather important global institution, electing a new boss. And so he's going to come in a minute and talk about that. And let us know what you think at the end in the comments, because I do read them, even the rude ones. I do read them, and you might even get a mug. Although I'm not sending one to the third time to the same person in Queensland, just perhaps two. Yeah, it makes a world record. Anyway, enough of me burbling on. Enjoy, Gerald. I'll see you at the end. Bye. Gerald, the minute I heard about a massive new event, I knew I had to contact you. And of course, I mean this.
That's it.
I'm so sorry.
I am ready for it. I haven't yet had it arrive.
Do you know what? It's embarrassing. International publishing company fails to get copy of book to influential American friend. I am very sorry. It will happen.
No. Don't worry. I can also,
email it to you page by page if I have to.
No, right. PDF. I prefer paper. I do.
No, but so do I. You can't read PDFs after a while. Your head hurts. But no, of course, I mean, what's happening in Rome? Oh, my goodness. It's your special
Congratulations,
subject.
By the way, on that.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gerald. And I went back actually to our interview we did 18 months ago about the Vatican and goings on at the Vatican, which was one of the more remarkable. I didn't know anything that you told me about how, for example, it was the only sovereign nation not to join in the attempts to get financial reparations for the Holocaust. I don't know if that's still the case, but that slightly blew me away. Yeah. And that there are many files that will never be opened, and they don't even know where they are.
Well, we assume they don't know where they are. I'm not quite sure of that. It's a sovereign nation that gets all the advantages of being a sovereign nation unless it doesn't want to be a sovereign nation. And it just sort of says, well, we only have observer status at the UN. We're not really a sovereign nation, but of course they are. So we really don't want to participate with all the other countries, even the little countries like,
Britain,
Luxembourg,
France,
and Liechtenstein, and everything else. We're a little bit different, and they've always been able to straddle that. It's a remarkably unique combination of head of state at the same time, but better known as the head of the religion. And the doctrine of infallibility, started in the 1950s, applies only to questions of religion if they invoke it. So not on state issues. They realize there's no such thing as infallibility on running the state.
Well, you wrote in this, I'll put a link into the bio, a terrific article for Forbes magazine within about 24 hours of the news breaking about Francis dying. And you said what they need now is Jesus Christ with an MBA.
Okay. It would help.
Why is that? Why is that, do you think?
Because when they didn't have Jesus Christ with an MBA, or at least a pope focused a little bit on the financial aspects of running this small sovereign entity and the church, they got in a lot of financial problems. So for years, it was fantastic for the Daily Mail and the Sun, the Mirror, and all the tabloids, because there'd be some great scandal about Vatican finances, or some Italian banker found hanging under Blackfriars Bridge, or some other Italian banker poisoned in an Italian jail with an espresso filled with cyanide, who had been God's bankers for the Vatican. Those things are, great to sell newspapers and stories, but not so great for the reputation of the church. So for decades, the Vatican Bank, which is sort of operates as a cross between a central bank and like a J.P. Morgan or Goldman Sachs for the Vatican, has been embroiled in all types of controversy because it didn't have transparency, didn't have international accounting standards or anything else. And then it was really the Pope before Francis who started to clean it up, because there was going to be oversight from the EU. And Francis is really the one, when he came in 2013, who put that transparency and cleanup on steroids. So he pushed against the traditionalists and the old guard who wanted to keep business as usual, pushed through a lot of reforms on the finances and exposing them, brought in outside auditors, things you would think you would expect, made every Vatican department have a public budget, seems sort of common sense, have it checked by real accountants, seems like common sense, and all of these things. And the reason I say one of the reasons that they should be looking at a pope with, Jesus Christ with an MBA, in addition to being a great religious leader, is that those reforms are about 65 to 70% complete. They aren't done. So if you get a pope in who is not focused on continuing the reforms, the old guard, especially in the bureaucracy of the Vatican, the so-called curia, they will slowly revert back to the way they like to do things, which is in the dark. And once you go in the dark on big money, things happen that aren't always kosher. So
I know, and there was an amazing story of that investment in a London hotel, where 130 million euros apparently just disappeared.
Yeah, they bought into a London. It's 60 Sloane, as a matter of fact. Nice piece of property, nice bridge, fantastic development property. It's going to be a bit of residential, offices, everything else. 350 million euros when they come in, big money. It's a whole consortium, including Vatican charitable organizations. And then there's a group of middle people who all took commissions and double commissions, and you're not quite sure how those kickbacks worked. And the next thing you know, the Vatican under Francis started 2 years ago an enormous corruption trial inside Vatican City. They do have a judiciary. It's not much of one. They do have a prosecutor. Not much of one, but they tried to try this case. They even brought a cardinal, which never had a cardinal been charged in this type of crime before, and 10 other defendants. They ended up losing, like you said, $136 million. But again, it exposed the fact that that corruption trial and those problems came after Francis had lost his main financial reformer inside the Vatican, and that was Australia's Cardinal Pell. So Pell was somebody that Francis relied on. He liked him. And Francis decided to upend the entire economic system inside the Vatican by creating the Secretary of the Economy, sort of like a treasury chief as we have in the U.S. or that, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer for you. And Pell is appointed to run that. And Pell is a no-nonsense person who is really tough. And then Pell gets investigated by an Australian commission looking into pedophilia and clerical sexual abuse, gets called back to Australia, and in the course of a long investigation gets convicted of molesting two choir boys in the 1950s. That's eventually overturned, but that's the end of Pell at the Vatican. And it really threw Francis off. He lost his hammer, if that makes sense. And then these little financial scandals like the one in London that start to pop up. So the end of Francis's tenure was not as stellar as the beginning and middle.
Extraordinary. So an attempt to address a financial scandal is upended by yet another sexual scandal in the church.
And I think that, the sexual scandals, when I dealt with them I took a quote for that chapter in my book. I called it A Criminal Underground in the Priesthood. That wasn't something I made up. It was a charge that one of the victims had actually called it an American lawsuit against the church. And I approached it from the money angle, not about what was it costing the church. And remarkably, by the time I wrote the book 10 years ago in 2015, the American church, because the churches are all different, everybody's sort of organized on its own, had spent $3 billion settling these lawsuits. It's an astonishing figure, $1 billion nearly on legal costs, and then $2 billion in settlements, with 11 of the dioceses going bankrupt and 2 religious orders going bankrupt. So the way the church had created these, of course, is just as if you were a property developer, let's say in London, and you've got 5 different projects going on. They're all incorporated. They're all under different business names. So if one doesn't work and it goes under, it doesn't bring down your entire empire as a developer. That goes bankrupt and the rest are still functioning. The Catholic Church has sort of done the same thing, much to the surprise of the faithful, which is every diocese is its own legal entity. And if one gets a $200 million judgment against it because there was clerical sexual abuse and then they covered it up for decades, it makes that particular diocese go bankrupt, like Baltimore, but it doesn't bring down the neighboring ones.
Right. I see.
And that's what happened.
So you talked about the Vatican having its own prosecutors, its own judges. What punishments? I mean, is there a prison? Do they fine people? And what actually happened to these guys involved in this, what looks like a money laundering scam?
So most of them came to plea agreements, which is to say, we won't do it again. The cardinal who was sentenced to 5 years hasn't actually started serving any time, but there is a jail in the Vatican, which may be a surprise to people. As a matter of fact, some of your listeners
you sort of wonder who the guards might be, particularly scary nuns. Maybe.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Those nuns, I had Sisters of Charity, the ones with the actual, look like the flying nuns, the starchats. Those were my teachers for 8 years in grammar school. And I will tell you, we were terrified of them, but we behaved as a result. There was a thing called VatiLeaks, which some of your listeners might remember, where documents were leaked inside the Vatican, and the Pope's, at that time, Pope Benedict, his butler, was charged for leaking them. I interviewed him extensively when I was back there, and he was put in prison, in the Vatican prison. He was the only prisoner in there. It's a small little cell. You can look outside and see sort of the Apostolic Palace across the way. By the way, the Vatican Bank is actually in what had been a prison back in the 11th century. That's what happens with these 2,000-year-old institutions. They sort of, reform things into other uses over a period of time. But there is a prison there. You can get sentenced into it. I assure you, it is nothing like the images we see of the El Salvador Supermax prison, in which people's heads are shaved and they are forced to share 40 to a bunk with very, very bad food. It would be considered what I call a country club prison by American standards. But it's still prison. It's still prison.
Sure, you don't want to go there. So you talk about the old guard. Who are these people and why do they want everything to be done in the dark? Are they themselves? Is it just that they're traditionalists, or are they always got half an eye to an angle and a deal? And are they, these are the people I guess will be voting for the next pope, will they?
Well, some of them will be voting for the next pope. I mean, when I talk to the old guard, and they all have different, it's hard to give this, it's never a monolith. They never all have the same incentive, but their basic argument is, they go back to the sovereign state argument. What they used to debate Francis about was, if we really are a sovereign nation, then these departments are the equivalent of government divisions. They're the equivalent of consulate divisions. There's the foreign department, and is the NHS, and as government divisions, they deserve a degree of autonomy. They deserve a little bit of privacy in the preparation of their work and how they do it, and then they also have to be transparent. But they rebelled against the idea that of too much transparency. They didn't like everything being exposed, and they certainly didn't like outside auditors. They wanted internal auditors. They wanted to keep it inside the system. The traditionalists also often are those who would like to see a church with a bit more pomp and circumstance. They viewed Francis not only as a meddler on finances, but that the man who is buried without any sign that he's Pope just says Franciscus, in a simple tomb and the simple burial coffin, and tried to make the church a little bit simpler and said the progressive right things about, on gays, who am I to judge, and things like that, irked many of the traditionalists who think that they need to have more pomp and circumstance to restore some faith in the trust, and that if they just become another tolerant church that says everybody has the right idea about who's God, we just have a different view of it, it weakens and waters down the doctrine. But you're right. He selected more than half, up to 80% by some counts, of the cardinals who will be voting in the upcoming conclave. He picked generally progressive cardinals. You would think that would mean that somebody would follow in his footsteps. But the one thing, Phil, that I can tell you with certainty is I've never been able to remotely pick a conclave correctly, because once they get going, there's politicking inside. There's hard politicking and everything else. Somebody is getting some votes and then they don't get enough, and so they drop out, and who they throw their support to, because maybe they want to be Secretary of State, so they throw their support over here. You're never quite sure how it comes out. And the best evidence of this in recent history is Francis himself. When in 2005, when Benedict was elected, Francis finished second. We don't know it at the time. We know it later. So that was pretty close. Then in 2013, when Benedict resigns, Francis is considered an also-ran. His day had passed. Nobody even considered him. And the British bookies, Ladbrokes and everybody else, who make wonderful odds on who will be the next pope, how they make them up, I don't know, but they do. They had odds in the last election in 2013 all the way out to cardinals for 150 to 1. Amazing. And Francis, then the Argentine Archbishop Cardinal Bergoglio, wasn't even on the list. Wow. They didn't even have him as 150 to 1 long shot. So he was considered out of the running. And after 2 days of conclave, he emerged as the winner. So you never know what's going to happen. And one thing for sure.
I was going to ask you about this, because I think you look at the conclave like some sports reporters look at the World Series. It's like you call it shot by shot. I'm surprised you're not on a plane already, because I think you love it, the intrigues and the plotting. And what is your current best guess, or do you not even make them anymore?
Well, so the lay of the land, I don't know what comes out at the end, but I know that there are three things at play. One is that the church, the cardinals, many of whom, by the way, this may surprise some of your listeners, have never met each other. We assume that this is a conclave where all the cardinals come together and they all know each other. And so they just start saying, hey, Phil, hey, Gerald, what do you think about this or that? They don't. Many of the cardinals appointed, especially those in the last year by Francis, have never been together with other cardinals. So there's that interpersonal relationship that'll play out as they do get together. In addition, whereas the last time when Benedict resigned and they had an immediate election, there was no chance for politicking. Here, Francis has been sick for months. We thought he was going to die almost 2 months ago. So there's been plenty of behind the scenes. We don't know what's playing out. There is a recognition that the church is losing followers to Pentecostal faiths in Africa and in parts of Asia. They've never had a pope from Africa. So there might be some incentive to do that. And I don't mean that in terms of ticking a diversity box. It's not like that. They're thinking maybe it's good. But the problem with the African cardinals as a whole, I'm going to overgeneralize, is that they're very conservative. And they're super conservative on LGBT issues and things like that. So that may be too far a step backwards for the church. They've never had a pope from Asia. Remember, Francis was the first pope from the Americas, Latin America, South America. They've never had a pope from Asia, maybe the Philippine cardinal. There's a large population there. The one thing for sure, I will be willing to bet my apartment on this. Don't hold me to it and come and collect if I'm wrong. It won't be an American pope. They all dislike the Americans at some level. The Americans have a lot of money. The cardinals use it. Trump is president. They can't stand the idea of an American being pope at this time, so that won't happen. And the other thing is the Italians, small contingent now, only 14 cardinals, used to be much larger. They desperately want the papacy returned to be Italian. The Vatican City is in the heart of Rome. It used to be an Italian institution. They took it for granted that the next pope would be Italian. Then they lost it in 1978 to the Polish pope. In came John Paul I. That was sort of a stunning blow to them. So they decided that won't happen again. So in 2005, when he died, they banded together, but they couldn't agree on who they wanted. They all wanted to be Pope. So they split their vote. And as a result, Benedict got in. So then in 2013, when Benedict resigned, they said, again, we're going to get an Italian Pope. And again, they all split their vote because they all wanted to be Pope. And Francis got in. So now it's a smaller group. But whether the Italians can band together and get enough support to return it to an Italian, I don't know, but they would like to.
Oh, so interesting. You did mention Trump. I mean, it's not exactly a sidebar. It's perhaps the thing we'll all remember most about the death of Francis is this extraordinary meeting between Zelensky and Trump at the Vatican, which we all saw those incredible photographs of. I know it's not what I've asked you to talk about, but I took a certain amount of hope from this. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I do as well. I even saw a report in one of the British papers today that William had played a role in that. Prince William, interesting. It would make sense, understanding there's nothing better on international relations or on any relations for that matter than actually sitting down in person and getting past all the rhetoric and the hoopla and that. And the interesting process is this meeting, which took place, is also gives some hope because the blow up with Zelensky and Trump at the White House now seems like a fading memory. And more than that, Putin has repeatedly embarrassed Trump in person. And there's nothing worse to do to Trump than to sort of, humiliate him in person, to show him to be less than effective at the person doing it. So maybe the stars are aligning for a bit of sanity on Ukraine. That would be very, very good and overdue from the American position. But I say that with the caveat being that I don't know if I've ever actually predicted what Trump's going to do next correctly.
No, you may have more luck choosing the next pope.
Yeah, because he's supremely unpredictable, and that may be his strength sometimes in negotiating with that, because they're never quite sure what he's going to do on the other side. But it's also the maddening part of him as well.
You mentioned that the Catholic Church is losing people to the Pentecostal movements, which tend to be more conservative, I think it's fair to say, and more hardcore, sort of tub-thumping, pulpit-bashing types of people. I keep reading that we're in the middle of a Christian revival in the world, and that, if the next pope's smart, he could sort of reboot the institution in numerous places, I'm sure, including America. Is this something that you think is likely? And if so, is it some kind of part of this kind of anti-woke backlash that we're meant to be living through as well?
It is possible. And it remains to be seen, because I think the key is this. If the Pope who was selected, let's say it was an Italian Pope or a European Pope, they're focused obviously on the area that they know best, which is Europe. Even as if it's an Eastern European Pope, they still are more familiar with Eastern Europe and Western Europe. And there isn't necessarily a Christian or Catholic revival. Certainly not in Europe. If anything, you might consider that in countries where officially Catholicism is the state religion, as in Italy and in France, for instance, it's under assault. But the church sort of is very tolerant and doesn't really stand back. If the next pope comes from Asia or Africa, Europe may not be the area in which they feel they need to wage the war for a Christian revival. And they may well have that in Africa and Asia and in South America, where people are looking for a more traditional, if not harder line, certainly clarity. They want a pope in many of those areas. The reason the Pentecostals have been able to steal them away. The Pentecostals essentially say, we're the real deal. We believe in Jesus as the Savior. We are firm on all these social issues, from abortion to LGBT rights to whatever else. And on top of that, we aren't filled with the clerical sexual abuse scandal. We don't waste our money on this lavish papal court inside Vatican City. And so they've lost their ways. It's sort of what Martin Luther did years ago. The very idea of, the Reformation inside the church, that the church was this lavishly over-the-top foundation that lost its core mission about just believing in Jesus, and that's what it was about. The reason we have a Protestant faith that's, flourishing is because of that original Reformation. The Pentecostals haven't had a Reformation, but they've just been peeling people off. And what does the church do to stop that? would mean a move back to a more traditional view and stance away from what Francis had. I'm not sure if that's going to happen.
So interesting. I mean, I think we are living through a time, like dealing with some Indian journalists and thinking a lot about Mr. Modi. We seem to be living through a time where the big power blocks take religion more and more seriously. We know in the Islamic world it's incredibly important. Under Modi, India is becoming a very, very much a dominant Hindu society. It's always been numerically dominant, but ideologically, theologically dominant. And that's feeding into all the tensions I think we're seeing now between India and Pakistan, because terrorist attacks don't help.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't know what the Christian version of that is. I mean, I think the nationalist parties in Poland are very, very much about their religion, and which is also a way of defining themselves against the Russians and also against immigrants, I'm afraid, in many cases too. So I don't know whether religion is back, and it's not necessarily in a very positive way.
Yeah, but it is interesting that so I see the religious component to that in terms of Poland, and it definitely the Hindu component with Modi, without any doubt, and it plays a role in their nationalism. But I also know, as a student of history, a political science major from donkey's years ago at Berkeley, that you can be a great nationalist protectionist society and be an atheist-based society, as the Soviet Union was. Certainly nationalistic, protectionist, and everything else, and not believe an iota in God. You could do the same thing with Mao and the Cultural Revolution. So that, yes, there is and in some ways, the danger of the religious component, if you mix it into, let's say, the Muslim faith or the Hindu, is it gives you a feeling that there's a divine sort of hand behind what you're doing. Would we have Islamist suicide bombers if they didn't think they were going up to eternal life, and some honor? I'm not quite so sure. But at the same time, kamikaze pilots in World War II who believed in the emperor, thought the emperor was God, but not really in an afterlife in that sense, were willing to fly their planes into and never wavered from that. So yeah, I think you can have the same type of protectionism and nationalism without the God factor. The God factor just adds an additional complication to it.
Well, goodness me, yes. Isn't that the much often quoted Voltaire line? I think those who will persuade you to believe absurdities will lead you to commit atrocities, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. It's very close. It should have been that if it wasn't exactly that.
Well, Gerald, thank you. I'm just grabbing you for half an hour. And I know you're so busy. Everybody wants your time at the moment because you are the man to call the shots on this extraordinary process. And I really appreciate it.
The great thing, Phil, is by not actually calling them, by saying, I don't have any idea what's going to eventually happen. Then after it happens, I can say, see, I told you so.
Yes, and I reckon you've probably got a couple of $100 on one of those British bookmakers, really.
150 to 1 odds are the only ones worth playing. All right.
Great to talk to you, my friend. Thank you so much. I know you're coming over to Britain soon. There is a space for you at that bar.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Mate. Take care.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Very lucky. I can just call people up like Gerald and get them to talk to me about things that are happening in the world. And I'm very conscious. I'm only lucky and able to do that because people tune in. A million of you, well, okay, some of you more than once, or maybe one person a million times. No, it's not that. Yeah, it's a community, and it's great being part of it. Thank you so much. I was thinking a bit more about the royals, actually. Well, that was uploading. What Harry must think of all this, because something else has been happening in the last couple of weeks. It's been a very good period for the official royal family, I think. Catherine back to health, it seems, looking and seeming very confident, very happy. The anniversary, all those lovely pictures in Scotland, very, very kind of relaxed and assured. And then William, being very, getting a lot of praise for his kind of quiet diplomacy, apparently, that's been happening with Trump. Not the easiest man to deal with. And apparently there was lots going on behind the scenes in Rome at the Pope's funeral that William was involved with. And this is big stuff. And then Charles recently put out this very, very moving statement about cancer. These are nationally and internationally important people. And I think they've got their poise back and their confidence back after the buffeting they must have had through the health crises that have rocked the family, but also all the things that are being said about them in America by Meghan and Harry. So yeah, Harry's, we know he likes having a public role and doing good things for his causes, and he's good at it. He was once very good at it, as was Meghan. I mean, they had that opportunity to be those people, and they kind of threw it away to pursue this row and wallow in the row, in my opinion, a little too much. And I wonder if maybe Meghan's trying to hold on to that anger a little more than Harry is now. Maybe that's what she means by the dragons. I don't know. He must look and see William so assured and think, that is a world I could be part of again. Because everything changes. Nobody would have imagined Camilla as a popular queen 20 odd years ago, maybe even 15 years ago. Certainly not in the years immediately after Diana's death. But things change. People can be reassessed. Bridges can be built and rebuilt. Who knows? But I just sort of wonder. It's been a good week for the official royal family. If you watch Shauna, Vintage Read, as you should, I know a lot of you do, she did a lovely programme recently all about the anniversary. Just, the success of that couple. And I speak as a former Republican who's still reassessed his views over experience of covering royal stories and being around courtiers and writing about Diana and sort of how I felt when the Queen died. There's something in it that kind of delivers, certainly for Britain, and maybe also for countries like Australia, although I think it's more of a 50-50 thing there. But Harry must be rather jealous right now, I think. What's he got? What has he got? He's got his wife doing drippy podcasts, trying to sell jam. I mean, it's kind of become a figure of fun, really. Yes, there'll be people around for some time who will say, I'm getting full body chills, Meghan, and they'll be given awards for being stunning and brave and taking on kind of whatever forces they think they're taking on. But they're on a declining track, aren't they? Their media careers run out of steam, and a lot of people are looking at them and they're feeling a bit sorry for them now. And yet there's that other world that he understands just there. If you can make that move, if you can make that bridge building move, and will she let him? Or does she still want to fight dragons? Anyway, I've been thinking about that quite a lot, as you may have noticed. Next week, Julie Bindle, I think, unless anything else happens, talking about the grooming gangs, the rape gangs, will not be an easy watch. It will be an important one. She's an incredibly significant figure in this story. I'm really lucky to get her, actually. I think she's, if not the first, one of the very first people to make it public 25 years ago, late 90s, early part of this century. And it's taken that long to get even this far. And as the Channel 4 show revealed this week, this far is not far enough to expose that properly, to make sure it never happens again. So see you next week. Thank you for this. Thank you for 1 million downloads. I'm so pleased with this figure. I mean, it's only a figure, but it just feels like a milestone. So I'm going to keep going for a bit longer yet. Thanks for your company and see you soon. Bye.
This has been a Podcast World production. If you want to contact me, write to team@podcastworld.org, placing Scandalmongers in the heading, or you can reach out via the social media links in the show's bio. And if you've enjoyed this episode and you want to support the show, please consider taking a few seconds to hit the donate button found just below this video. Many thanks, and see you next week.